Next up, we are really happy to invite the speaker Long from Europe, England, and to join us, Simon Halstead, which is the senior director of exchange and supply in Verizon Media. And from what I learned, that he is also a former chair of the IAB Europe Programmatic Trading Committee and has been in this industry for almost 10 years. So, hey, Simon, how are you?
Good morning, everybody. This is the first words I've spoken out loud today. So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon to you all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm going to jump into my presentation. I think the content so far has been excellent. And I just want to say that you may see some similarities, but I always think that's a good thing because that actually means the challenges of the industry are well understood and the paths we need to take forward will work together. So I would like to talk today about monetizing in a changing world. And I think actually, as per the previous presentation, it's really important to accept the change and recognize that we're on a journey all together, both on the demand and the supply side. I will just touch on who I am. So I am very old. I was a TV buyer originally. I've worked on the agency side and then worked selling digital advertising since the early 2000s. And I love digital. My current role is Senior Director Exchange Supply for International for Verizon Media. That means I look after our teams that work with publishers to recruit supply to our platforms. And then I work with the teams that work with bidders and buyers to create demand to that platform for us and our partners. And I'm responsible for those relationships across APAC, across Europe and Latin America. I live in the UK. It says London. It's not actually London, but London's easiest than trying to describe where I'm really from. For those of you that don't know Verizon and Verizon Media, we are obviously a large global telecommunications company and a data-focused company, data and tech-focused company. We're broken into three divisions. So Verizon Consumer, that's our traditional phone-based business, phone service, Fios service in the US. We have a business group where we're providing enterprise-class solutions to partners. And then we have Verizon Media, which was born a few years ago by Verizon's acquisition of AOL and its acquisition of Yahoo, which formed together oath that grew into Verizon Media. So we're all looking forward about how we can enhance customer relationships moving forward, be that as a business partner, be that as a consumer relationship, or be that as a provider of media and value. And we underpin that with two focuses of trust and innovation. And that's also really core into this topic because we really need to think about what the experience is for a consumer and what the experience is for our partners. So our business structure actually represents a lot of the privacy conversation we need to understand. But wow, what a year 2020 has been, right? I think we started this year and very few people could have predicted what has happened. I think the start of Q1, I don't know about everyone else, for me, was good. Revenue looked good. We were making progress. I loved it. And suddenly, as we got through Q1, the impact of COVID started to impact. And obviously, that was felt first in this region with rapid lockdowns and changes. It spread really globally through that early February, March period and had a very significant effect on the global economy from really March onwards, seeing lockdowns across Europe and severe and very unfortunate impacts around the globe. It's also driven a financial crisis. It's driven a pull of spend from a lot of advertisers, and it's driven significant shifts in consumer behaviors. And as per the previous presentation, how people are consuming media is changing, what people need to advertise, and even people's physical needs are changing significantly. But we are now at the point, hopefully, as we move forward, there will be a path to vaccines and there will be a path to recovery. That's made it a year for marketers to reset. They've had to adjust to that changing consumer habit. They've had to adjust to the expectations of their brands. And there's been other things in the world beyond COVID. Think of the campaigns around racial injustice and the incidents that have happened there and the impact that's had to how consumers and advertisers want to be messaged to and wants to be spoken to. And then they're trying to find a way to recover to pre-pandemic or even just survive and sustain their businesses through that period. I'm just going to pause and take a sip of my coffee. One sec, sorry. I think it's fair to say that the pandemic has accelerated the digital transformation. From some global web index study waves, we've got these data points, and I think they're really interesting. 95% of consumers say they're spending more time consuming media. 71% say they're spending more time streaming or watching videos, and that's again the change in whether we commute, how we commute, time spent at home. And importantly, 68% of consumers are saying they're consuming more news than 6 months ago. And actually, the environment and trust you can build in news relationships is really important, particularly in challenging times. And it's always important to think about how you target in those environments, using the value of news rather than bluntly resisting news as a topic. But let's move on to the industry data changes or challenges that we see. And you'll see that I appeared to have a cookie on this yogurt at some point, but it's crumbled rather significantly. So today, data is powering the ecosystem. It fuels the audience insight. There's machine learning driving insights and optimization against those data points. For publisher contents and content producers, we're using it to acquire new users, to actually decide even on content we want to build. And we're using that traffic to drive monetization. And then for advertisers and marketeers, we're connecting billions of user events across publisher websites or our own sites as advertisers or marketeers, and trying to drive user engagement to create fresh data and really drive consumers in a virtual circle. If you go and look at the advertising cycle, it's even more complex, right? Advertisers' media buying process is driven by goals informed by data all the way through the process. And it is worth recognizing that some of these data points are going to be impacted and changed. And some of the decisions we make, both about how we target, but even how we decide what is the effective way, may change. We may see a return to more A/B testing type performance. Do I see just a sales uplift without being able to make it a directly trackable event? We also need to look at how we can continue to support optimizing that data. And I thought the previous presentation covered it really well when it spoke about the need to have consumer consent and to have worked with consumers in that value and data transfer. So you'll all see these versions of cycles as we obviously understand what is our budget, who are we targeting, what data can I see from previous campaigns, how do I then target and optimize those people? Is that delivering the results? Am I seeing those results online? Am I collecting data and conversion information? And am I seeing offline measurement? Now, some of these steps may no longer exist, but some of those factors will still be available as we move forward. The rise of behavioral and interest-based targeting has led to prolific user tracking. And I think it's also worth remembering the experience from the consumer at this point. The advertiser wants accurate behavioral and interest-based targeting. That leads to more and more cookies being dropped to understand and identify data. The advertiser wants better measurement and optimization, and that is a good thing. We all want better measurement and optimization. That can actually impact the consumer experience on a page or a publisher's experience with the number of sync pixels that are involved. An advertiser wants a reliable identity graph. That leads to challenges around, is that data being collected in a consumer private and transparent way? So whilst consumers, because a lot of this feels doom and gloom, and I agree we should not feel doom and gloom about this, we should think about evolution. Consumers are concerned about personal data and privacy, but also 88% see a benefit in personalized ads. So it's also important to remember that good advertising brings value, okay? With utility and relevance and interest being the top benefits that people see. And addressability plays a key role in digital advertising. So today we can address audiences well in a Chrome environment, okay? That's an environment we have good addressability from. Therefore, we're able to leverage all the data insights we've talked about, and that allows the advertisers to make informed and intelligent bidding decisions. That's a benefit to a publisher of a higher eCPM or revenue because it's a richer audience. It's a benefit to the advertiser because they can measure and optimize their campaign performance. And for the viewer, that means those ads should have greater relevance as well. But that data availability is changing, and I think it's important to note has been changing for a while. So this has been covered in the other presentations. I'm not going to talk about it that significantly at this stage. We're going to talk about these specific impacts in a little bit more depth. What I do think is it's worth looking at this as a movement, and this is a movement that's more than just cookies. This is about consumer trust, and consumer control of data. So as someone who has lived through 2.5 years of a GDPR experience and just worked on rolling out the transparency and consent framework version 2, there are paths where the industry can collaborate well together, but it takes people working, and it takes us all as an industry also to stop and listen to what regulators are saying to us. So we'll see the changes from Chrome, from Safari, from Firefox. I thought Xander, I had a chart on it, but Xander's chart was excellent about that timeline of change. So here's the simplified version of it. 2018 was probably the first big impact, right? GDPR hit in Europe, and it was a very significant impact. For a lot of publishers, for a lot of advertisers, their addressable audience in the first days dropped very significantly, by up to 50% for those first few days. Then as industry worked together and worked through frameworks and solutions, that's recovered somewhat, but not always to 100% in every place. And even that framework wasn't perfect and has had to be evolved via consultation with the industry. And it's great to see that in the latest version of it, we now have pretty much full industry collaboration. Google as a partner have joined. Amazon are also in the transparency and consent framework. And that gives us a structure where we're able to share a consent that has been given. And there are guidelines around how that consent has to be given. And there are also requirements that in order to store a cookie, someone actually has to have expressly given consent. But then there are other changes that are coming over the hill. So we see with intelligent tracking prevention, protection, we see with the Californian regulation in 2019 that went into effect this year, that again, different changes and slightly different rule sets around how data can be handled. This year and into 2021 has brought the iOS changes and the implementation of CCPA. Today, that probably best sits described as no IDFA without consumer opt-in. And then we'll see a point in 2022 where Chrome, potentially, where Chrome third-party cookies are depreciated. So Google and Safari, Google are following the Safari and Firefox approach. So as we look at those regulations, where are they similar? Where are they different? And these are important to think about how consumer regulations get passed. So CCPA was passed in 2018. It went into effect in January the 1st, and it was enforced from July 2020. It only applies to California, but has required a lot of US companies to look at how they're handling data across the whole country. Interestingly, very different to GDPR as a comparison, it's a consumer opt-out model. GDPR requires active and a consumer opt-in for consent, and that's part of that trust conversation. It does give the user rights to access the categories of data use. It does give the right for someone to object to their data being sold, versus GDPR, which actually gives the right to object to the collection of that data. And it both give the right to delete personal information. So you'll see the same sorts of data are covered in this case. But it's not just California, it's not just Europe. We have just seen the implementation of LGPD. That literally does mean the same thing as GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation in Portuguese, but my Portuguese is not very good. Again, it's a consumer opt-in model. Again, it gives some right to access and revoke, but even the implementation of LGPD is very different to GDPR, and actually the process for gaining consent is different. And I talk about this from a global connected infrastructure, which is one of the benefits of programmatic. Increasingly, we're having to also deal with local adaptation and local fractions of different data being available. As we move on to look at the browser changes, again, these have largely been covered, but it's worth noting that the Chrome challenge, whilst in the future and a big concern, is a change that's already happened to a level with both Safari and Firefox changes. So default booking of data across domains from Firefox from September 19. Safari uses a model to, obviously with IPT, to just protect that data. It means our third-party cookies are 100% blocked, Firefox largely blocked. It means Chrome have made some same-site changes, but have the plan to retire the third-party cookie by February 2022, assuming that there have also been built-for solutions. And actually, working through the privacy sandbox is an important industry initiative for everyone, and for everyone, hopefully, to also follow, track, and be involved, and listen to the solutions that are outcoming. It's also worth noting that iOS 14 potentially limits the ability of Chrome on iOS even to track. And one thing I should have said, so I'm just going to pause and say it here, is this is a really dynamic environment. So I don't think anyone today is offering you a solution. I think everyone is, and I'm certainly not offering you a single solution. I am trying to offer you the chance to understand the changes and engage and actually understand the paths and partners you need to move with. I originally, when it came to talking about the iOS changes, was going to tell you to do something. As that guidance is evolving and evolved from late last week to this week, where I did an internal presentation, to today, I've had to change my messaging pretty quickly. Why am I showing that? I think that's actually important to understand that this is a live topic that we all need to keep following and investing in, and make certain we're considering the impacts to our businesses and the impacts we want to go forward. But we may have to pivot through those paths. We may look at partnerships as a way to do that. So the IDFA change that's coming, or the for AAID for Google, there is no timeline against Google, but Apple announced with the iOS release in iOS 14 initially that they would be requiring an active consent for capturing an IDFA and using it for targeting. Okay, and that would have impacted, probably, we expected opt-in would have been 10 to 40%, so 60% plus potential opt-out. So this is what I was going to say to you. There was going to be a message that would be posted onto phones where each app would have to gain permission about allowing the app to share data to track you across apps and websites to have access to your IDFA. And there was a simple allow tracking or ask app not to track. Some really important thing here. Some of this was a one-time opt-in, so there was a requirement to show that to the consumer. If the consumer opted in, that's fine. If the user opted out, there isn't an ability to re-show them that message. You had to accept that judgment, and it is important to accept consumer signals too. But that's changed. That the Apple have postponed the activation with permission to track until Q1 2021. Okay, there is some industry engagement going on between Apple and the IAB Tech Lab and IAB in the US, and some other trade bodies, including app developers, about the level of impact. So I don't actually have an active recommendation for you here, other than to keep following, if you're an app developer or trying to target app environments, to keep following this topic as it develops. And there may be an option where we all accept that we no longer have access to IDFA, but we are still able to do lots of the things that are important for measurement and tracking of app installs or return on investment. Or it may be that actually we have to go down this route of showing that consent permission to to consumers. So I've talked a lot about what it means for advertisers, for what's going on in the past, and I've covered some ground that's been covered before. What does this mean for advertisers, and what does it mean for publishers as well? If identity is used for all of these things for an advertiser, so audience targeting, optimization, conversion tracking, ID syncing, allowing DSPs and SSPs to share identity of users, and frequency management, all of these things can be impacted by a depreciation of addressability. And actually, this impact is pretty strong on the web. Once the Chrome implementation occurs, it's going to be very, very challenging to target on a first-party basis, to activate, on a third-party cookie basis, to optimize the frequency cap, even for dynamic creative and measurement. There are changes that come with iOS, but we've talked about where they set. It's worth noting there are some emerging channels where actually we're not talking about that one-to-one relationship. We're not talking about an individual cookie, and so there's less of an impact to targeting and measurement in a CTV space or a digital out-of-home space. And I think that's also about what is the approach taken to advertising into some of those screens, where it's much more around a broadcast and a reach-led approach than necessarily that one-to-one targeting approach. An important part here is always rethinking, just because we can, should we be targeting that way? So the cookieless world does mean massive, massive impacts for marketers and publishers. Platform partners need to know users to identify user experience. There is also the need to have a first-party relationships and cookie, so that you can manage your content settings and how a consumer experiences your content. And we have to work through all of these things, and we have to look at where there are industry solutions and how we apply, or how we actually set the expectation of what we'll deliver. I do think sometimes when we talk about these solutions, and actually a lot of credit to the Xander presentation, it's important to recognize that there's no magic fix, there's no single fix. And we're not going to be in the same state as we are today about the percentage of audience that we can address. Now, today, the audience we can address is already impacted by IPT on Safari browsers and Firefox's limitations on third-party cookies. So we can already only really address that Chrome audience fully. I think we will end up in a version of these states, and I haven't assigned percentages, but I think we will end up in a point where there is an identifiable web, where there is a direct one-to-one consumer relationship, which is basically a logged-in data, and where there has been a good value exchange from a publisher to a consumer, and that consumer is giving permission for that personal identification to be shared. There is going to be an opportunity for an anonymous web where you don't have that insight to the user, but you can infer things about their context or behavior, more advanced contextual solutions, again, looking more at some of the more traditional media planning routes. And then there is going to be a group of the web where there is less value, where there is less understood context or usable context and less value. And again, that's going to impact how performance occurs in each of those areas. The identifiable web will likely increase significantly in cost because it will be supply constrained. The contextual understanding and even using machine learning to improve contextual will continue to give another load of opportunities, but people are going to have to address their audiences differently. And then at the bottom, there's still value. There's still opportunities for simple ads, for reach, for just putting broadcast messages out and not worrying about frequency. But the level of insight and control you get from that space will change dramatically. So we all know the problems. I feel like I'm just talking about problems. What can we do? We as a company, so we as Verizon Media, we're leaning on our learnings from GDPR. And it's important to remember we're a publisher, so we have that publisher relationship with consumers. We need to balance that relationship. We're a DSP and an SSP. We're a full stack solution. And so we're having to understand all of the different value exchanges that go on. So we need to look at where we can have inventory scale, where there is first-party data we can access at scale, understand the measurement challenges, look at where there are consent frameworks that can support us, look at where we can grow other targeting opportunities. But a big one is direct relationships. Sorry, I didn't mean to click forward there. And I think it's really important about people building meaningful relationships with the partners that matter to them. And that's the sources of supply that have that data, that have that logged in, that logged in insight, that have that permission to share data in a compliant and friendly way. And to understand also where you want to buy and the real value you're buying versus potentially just the constant availability that has existed in an exchange world. So for the advertiser demand side, I think there are things that need to be considered. One thing, absolutely an activity for everyone on the advertiser and demand side, is to follow the Google Privacy Sandbox, the Chrome version. There are a load of different solutions in there, and I thought the presentation this morning was really interesting. I continue to read about it. We continue to engage in it as a company as well. I think one of the important things which wasn't covered today, but that's also moving away, and some of this applies in the Apple framework as well, that's moving away from true one-to-one addressability, but still being able to address de-identified cohorts or groups of users in the sandbox. And in the Apple environment, there is the SK Ad Network solution, where for app conversion, Apple itself may be able to let you know who converted, but they will never actually pass the specific data. So you'll be able to track that you achieved a conversion using that SDK, but it won't be one-to-one. You won't necessarily have the data. You'll still be able to get the confirmation. From an advertiser, I think you need to consider how you're actually evaluating success. And that's definitely considering it from the last click, and that's definitely considering it from just an audience basis. It may come back, as I said earlier, to much more A/B testing, to looking at actual just sales uplift and changing how you buy and target activity. I think there's also the focus on context. So looking at the contextual signals that publisher give and understanding what those contextual signals mean to you as a buyer, and then how you can build and target audience against context without actually having personal data involved. And then without doubt, you're going to need to partner with select identity partners. We saw somebody talked about there are a number of industry solutions in terms of IDs that are being developed, that are being worked into the browser process to try and make certain that they are supportable. Companies like LiveRamp, and you'll see other companies move into this space. And I think as an advertiser and a partner, you're going to think about which DSP you use or what partner you want to use, and what is their position on identity. And then as a publisher, where have I connected and where am I enabling my data through in a way that gets it scaled? But the really important thing here is it is partners. This is a very personal opinion. There's not one ring to rule them all, from a Lord of the Rings analogy. You will have to pick multiple partners to serve different parts of your needs, or to differently solve the customers and buyers you work with. The same for publishers. Right now, there should be a big focus on developing your first-party audience. How can you improve the value exchange with that partner? How can you gain a login in order by giving value? And how can you make that a transparent and free choice so that you get the right to use that data? And then you can take the data and understanding you have and look at how you can package that moving forward. And it's not always easy to get login data. So it really is thinking about, how do I want to engage with my consumer? But also look at other ways to diversify monetization. So as well as looking at the changes to the type of ads you see, think about how else you can develop that relationship with the consumer. One US publishing brand that I won't mention, it's not one of our brands, since the iOS changes, seems to have taken a very, very aggressive approach to its web experience of offering its premium service. It's always pushed its premium subscription service for news content. But right now, if you try and hit it on an iOS device, I would say about 90% of the articles are being pushed behind their paywall. That's an interesting choice, right? As a publisher, is that going to generate them more money, or is it going to lead to frustration and users not visiting that site? And that requires ongoing testing and evolution. The other thing you can do as a publisher is really enrich your contextual services. So think about even how you publish and where you can add that contextual insight and data so that there are alternative means to reach your audience. But beyond that, partner with selected identity partners, partner with select demand and supply partners, and understand who can provide full value within that ecosystem. So here comes the salesy bit. Why partner with Verizon, right? We are a large number of global brands. You'll know us as Yahoo very strongly in Taiwan. You will know some of our other global brands like HuffPost, AOL. We also partner and sell with Microsoft in some regions around the world, so you can see an Xbox logo here. We have a really rich set of data, diverse signals, not just cookies, both mobile device from our own publishing sites, from our understanding of what happens with mailbox environments and how people are consuming. We obviously have carrier data in the US, we have location data, again, where collected with appropriate consent. And we have a full stack advantage with the DSP and SSP that work together. And so that means we use one shared identity in that space. And that gives us an opportunity for when demand is coming from our supply to really leverage our own data against it. I've sort of talked about this slide, so I'm going to skip it just in the interest of time. But these are just the whole range of different data sources we work on. And, you know, we're also evolving our business. So we're looking at how we can enrich our contextual signals and build better contextual solutions for people. So we will take a comprehensive approach to cookieless solutions. We will look at where we will have a persistent identity and where that's going to be accessible. We will look at where we can drive other cookieless solutions like advanced contextual solutions. And we'll also look at industry partners. We'll look at where we can join or partner with some of those industry opportunities, and where we'll join those as both pass along, so we're able to use them through our systems, or actively engage and be part of their activity. I'm near the end, guys, so don't worry, there is a break coming. Where does it come in? So for the advertisers in the room, actually really important you think about your own first-party data relationship. Build a relationship with consumer based on trust. Be more explicit about how you're going to use data. Be more explicit about the value exchange. But also, if you build that data pool, then you can look at using solutions where you can commingle that data to better understand an audience and address it without a cookie. Okay? Give them the reason, give them the opportunity to log in or opt in. And then think about which partners you want to make that data available through. And I would heartily recommend that Verizon Media is one of those partners you use. And I know for people in Taiwan, you can talk to our whole team there. There's Leo Henry from my team. There's the whole sales team, the same for Hong Kong. But there are lots of opportunities to bring your data, to evolve and enrich your data, and then to bring that with our platforms to create a good opportunity for you to be able to leverage the part that is addressable. The same for publishers. You've got to know your consumer and you've got to build a value exchange for them to log in. And then you've got to work out how you can craft that integration with selected partners, and you've got to think about how you evolve your experience. Do you give a different, more premium experience? Do you give a less ad experience where you get logged in data? And do you give a rougher experience that drives people to opt in? Or do you look to build commerce solutions that can help you drive revenue direct from page rather than being entirely or solely reliant on advertising as well? So I think there's a lot to take in here, and I think it's a real positive that the sessions today have actually touched on lots of the same topics. And I think it's good that you see that the streams that exist through the industry are consistent. Without doubt, it's understanding the value of your own data, be you demand or publisher side. It's working out how you can improve and increase that data and make it active and make it actionable without the use of a third-party cookie. I think it's also working about which stacks you work with, where you prioritize your activity and spend through to give you the best opportunity to continue to drive success. But remember, there will be new opportunities and new audiences to address. Remember that just because we could target on a very one-to-one basis in the past, that may not be the best path forward as you look to reach your consumers. Most important, and my final message, and this is my final slide, we actually only win by working together as an industry in this space. So I think actually these are great events where people can hear the evolution, but do lean in and talk to all your partners and do look at solutions that apply well to your market. So thank you very much for your time today. I'm just going to jump back so I can see the video hang out for a sec. But it's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope that was useful and interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Simon, for joining us, especially for this early in the morning. And we are really happy to have you to share with us about your perspective, especially how Verizon Media could help publishers, and not only publishers, but also advertisers to trying to, actually, I think solution is all there, but we really need to have time to spend some time and digging and work together with great technology partners like you. So thank you again for joining us, and yeah, have a good day.
No worries. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.